Okay, everyone. So I've been playing Doki Doki Literature Club recently, and I've really fallen in love with this game. It's absolutely fantastic. And something that it really reminded me of is the old first-person shooter games from the 90s called Marathon, which were Bungie's games before Halo. Specifically, the notion of rampancy in those games.
You might
Now,
want
rampancy
to.
also figures prominently into Halo,
You know me.
but it's the aspects of how it's presented in Marathon that I thought were a little more applicable to Doki Doki.
You keep it.
So, rampancy is basically like this level of self awareness in which the AIs experience various stages, such as anger or jealousy, and they can also become increasingly dangerous. Now, there is a stage beyond rampancy called Meta-Stability, and that's basically where the AI can be considered a true entity, or even a true person, if you will. Now, in the games, Durandal, despite being a sarcastic asshole with plans on escaping the closure of the universe, does in fact become metastable. Meanwhile, Tycho is permanently stuck in the anger stage of rampancy. So I thought that was a really interesting way to look at Doki Doki, considering we've got two characters in Monika and Sayori that both experience self-awareness over the course of the game. And that's basically the topic at hand here. In what ways do they experience rampancy, and do either of them achieve metastability? Let's dive in. Something I do find interesting is that Monika and Sayori, the ones that become self-aware, are the only ones with normal colored eyes. Blue for Sayori, green for Monika, whereas Natsuki and Yuri's eye colors both match the color of their hair. Let's start off with Monika, who is sort of the driving force behind the game. Unlike Sayori, Monika is self-aware throughout the duration of the main story, stating that she's had some epiphany recently, which is obviously the moment that she became self-aware. Something interesting is that in the side stories, which I know take place before and are unrelated to the events of the main game, is that Monika is presented as completely normal. And it's also very obvious that she at least was a good person and cares very deeply for her friends. I think that much is obvious here in this scene with Sayori, where Sayori confesses her depression and Monika is kind of there for her. And it's this really kind of genuinely touching scene that I think does a great job of showing the kind of person that Monika was and what the state of self-awareness or rampancy can do to a person. Of course, we know that Monika is more than just simply self-aware. Her rampant state also affords her the power to manipulate the game itself. In Act 1, she's relatively reserved and more just seems to be testing the waters with her powers, not yet ready to fully commit to wholesale changes to get her way. This argument that Yuri and Natsuki have, for example, we know from the conversation with Sayori afterwards that this is out of character for them, but it's basically a way that Monika is trying to affect the player's perception of Yuri and Natsuki. She's basically trying to drive us away from them and more towards her. By the time we get towards the end of Act 1, Sayori's depression starts to show more due to the changing situation, and we know Monika communicates with her before and after Sayori admits her depression to the player. While we never know exactly what Monika says to Sayori, it's clear from Sayori saying things like Monika was right, as well as the "get out of my head before I listen to everything she said to me" from her poem the morning of the festival, that Monika is pushing her in a certain direction. This all, of course, tragically culminates in the end of Act 1 with Sayori's suicide, as well as the game beginning to glitch and becoming corrupted and unstable, much like Monika herself. It isn't long before we find ourselves at this glitched title screen, ready to begin Act 2, where Monika slips further into rampancy. Act 2 starts the same way as Act 1, only Sayori's name appears glitched before anything remaining of her is seemingly deleted by Monika. From here, the game begins to glitch even more with visual oddities due to Monika's meddling with the code, including this rather bizarre one where Natsuki's eyes pop right out of her head. The argument between Yuri and Natsuki also escalates even further. Sayori is no longer available to dissolve the situation, and picking either only leads to a scene with Monika taking the player outside while the two finish arguing. With Monika, of course, stating she's happy to spend time with us if we're now turned off from engaging with Natsuki and Yuri. As her rampancy worsens, Monika begins to come across even more unsympathetic to her friend's issues. After Natsuki has an incident where she nearly passes out, Monika tells us that Natsuki's father often doesn't keep food in the house, nor does he give her money for lunch at school, and as a result, Natsuki is extremely malnourished, and then she speculates that's why she's so much smaller than the other girls. She then basically brushes that off by saying that some guys prefer petite girls. Holy cow, Monika. She then goes on to throw a protein bar on the floor like she was tossing a treat to a dog. He then reassures us that Natsuki is fine and that this happens every once in a while, before being basically like, "Hey, let's share poems now, wouldn't that be fun?" But it's Yuri that Monika affects the most. Her intent, of course, is to drive the player further away from her, but this backfires as Yuri is unable to control herself, and her own obsession with us spirals out of control. Yuri's tendency to self-harm is exacerbated by Monika, and we actually learn from one of the game's secret poems that Monika herself has been experimenting with her own mortality, stating that she knows how a redacted name, that is clearly Yuri, feels when doing it. Though she won't go further with it unless she fully intends to kill herself, which maybe she would have done had it not been for the discovery of us, the player, that led to her being stuck in her obsessive state of rampancy. One of the most sad things about Monika's meddling with Yuri is that Yuri herself knows that something is wrong. She's usually very timid and reserved, but she knows she's acting out of the ordinary. After sharing her poem with the player, she can hardly believe what she has just done. She's basically mortified by her own actions and feels sick and hastily runs out of the classroom to vomit. Natsuki senses this as well as she writes us a secret note imploring us to get Yuri some help, as well as saying that it's not a good idea to tell Monika about this. But, of course, Monika is always listening, and very quickly she changes Natsuki's mind for her, and suddenly Natsuki is saying how she and Yuri aren't good enough for us before imploring us to be with Monika. Just Monika. As we wind down on Act 2, we once again face a decision on who to help for the upcoming school festival. Only this time we have no choice but to pick Monika. Yuri takes extreme issue with this and accuses Monika of jealousy and taking us away from her every chance she gets, before going on to suggest Monika kill herself, and that would be beneficial to her mental health. Also, I'm with Natsuki here, and Yuri is reaching the point of no return. It isn't long before Yuri rushes Monika and Natsuki out the door, and we're left alone in the club room with her. She mentions one last time that there's definitely something wrong with her, but she doesn't care because all she wants is to be with us. She then goes on to confess that even after only knowing us a few days, that she's madly in love with us. She then asks if we accept her confession of love, and whether or not we do, it's enough to send her over the edge. Driven past the point of madness, Yuri then does the unthinkable and takes her own life right in front of us. On a side note, it's a little ridiculous that in the PlayStation version, the blood during the stabbing is censored to black, and then this is the very next image we see. Anyway, at this point the game crashes basically, and we're left with poor Yuri's decomposing corpse over the weekend, before being discovered Monday morning by Natsuki, who promptly vomits and flees the club room. Monika then shows up and apologizes for our boring weekend. It's then that her ability to alter the game's code becomes incredibly apparent as she promptly deletes Yuri's and Natsuki's character files, while also eating one more of Natsuki's cupcakes before they're wiped from existence. Act 2 then comes to an end as Monika makes the biggest change to the game yet. Enter Act 3, Just Monika. A fully rampant Monika has seemingly deleted just about everything, and we are left in what I call the last room. Like Tycho being stuck in the anger phase in Marathon, Monika's discovery of her self-awareness culminates in her forsaking everything she knew just to be with us. She's unable to break out of this obsession with us, and now here in the last room, it's all there is now. Just us. Here she'll ask if we'll go out with her, naturally giving us the only choice that exists in her mind. He'll then talk about a variety of topics ranging from deep thoughts to mundane observations. He'll also talk a bit about the other characters, including filling us in on Sayori's final moments, noting that her fingertips were bloody because she was clawing at the rope. At first, Monika thinks maybe Sayori changed her mind, but then settles on it simply being a survival instinct response to claw at that which was choking her. I'll be honest, this was probably the most disturbing moment in the game for me, and as someone who cares a lot about Sayori, I found it pretty upsetting. Seriously, you think back to the side story where Monika is comforting Sayori, and it's crazy to see the person that Monika has become. The epiphany that she's a video game character drove her mad, drove her into rampancy. What would the person that she was make of the one that she became? This is the tragedy that has come to define Monika. But we at least aren't doomed to spend eternity with Monika in the last room. She herself will occasionally offer a solution, though never intending us to go through with it. That is, of course, doing the same thing to her that she did to the other girls, deleting her character file. Upon being deleted, Monika begins to glitch, questioning what's happening. Soon enough, she shows us anger for the first time, saying that we're horrible and we just want to torture her. But it's not long before she tells us she still loves us. It's here we also see her express remorse for her actions for the first time and come to grips with the horrible things that she did. She also admits that not everyone is truly deleted, as she couldn't bring herself to do it. They were her friends, and she did love both them and the literature club. Then, in an apparent last act, Monika initiates a kind of reset that launches us into Act 4. That's right. Enter Act 4, a seemingly Monika-less world. I confess to getting a little emo at seeing Sayori, Yuri, and Natsuki alive and well. This act begins much like Act 1 and 2 with the player joining the literature club, where Sayori is now the president. Things go pretty smoothly without Monika's corrupting influence. We're once again treated to Natsuki's cupcakes, and I genuinely think it's adorable that Yuri and Natsuki are going on a bit of a girl date to the bookstore to buy books for one another. As the two of them head off to the bookstore, it's just you and Sayori left in the club room. Sayori thanks us for joining the club, stating we're going to make it the best ever. But then Sayori reveals herself to be self-aware, telling us she knew we were coming to the club, and then proceeds to thank us for getting Monika out of the picture. She knows everything Monika did, but none of that matters now as it's just us. That's right. Sayori has descended into rampancy, and at a seemingly much faster rate than even Monika did. Though this is likely just because this is the end of the game. But Sayori wastes no time and transports us to the last room, where we're to seemingly spend eternity with her. This is where Monika returns, having watched from the shadows, if you will. She states she won't let Sayori hurt us and proceeds to delete everything, bidding us a final farewell as the game comes to an end. Credits roll and we're forced to reset the game in the desktop's menu. And now we have an opportunity to delete Monika's file before the game even starts. Doing so forces Sayori to become self-aware again. As she speculated, this is likely because she's assumed the role of Literature Club president, with Monika no longer being part of the game. The difference here is she no longer has any knowledge of what took place in the game, and she enters a stage of rampancy that can only be described as pure panic. She begins to question her own existence and what even is going on. As her panic reaches a breaking point, she quickly closes the game, and attempting to relaunch it just reveals that this revelation was too much for her and she has committed suicide. The game can no longer be played and must once again be reset from the desktop files. So Sayori has experienced self-awareness in two scenarios. One where we play through the game and Monika deletes everything, and one where we delete Monika before anything happens at all. But there's a third way in which Sayori can become self-aware, and that's by achieving the game's good ending. This is done by writing 3 poems each for Sayori, Yuri, and Natsuki in Act 1. Normally this is not possible since you can only write 3 poems in Act 1. But by creating a save file before the first poem and then loading back to it before the festival, you can do this for each girl. I actually think this is pretty genius, as exploiting saving and loading has long since been a trick done by gamers to see different outcomes of choices in various games. It's less common now in the age of auto-saving, but we used to do it all the time, and I think it's pretty cool that this is how we get the game's good ending. Very meta indeed. Having spent time with the 3 of them in Act 1, we now once again reach the point in Act 4 where Sayori reveals herself to be self-aware. Only this time there is no deadly obsession. There is no state of panic. That's right. Sayori has bypassed any form of rampancy and is now metastable. An interesting note is that where Durandal survives his rampancy to become metastable, Sayori omits that step completely. I actually genuinely love how we get here. It's through acts of kindness that Sayori is saved, and it's a really nice feeling knowing that she's okay. And her depression is by no means gone. It's a part of her, much like the other girls' issues, or anyone's issues for that matter, are a part of them. But it's a realistic and relatable way to portray them, and they're certainly more at peace with themselves than they were under Monika's corruption. Sayori then goes on to thank us for spending time with everyone, saying that's all she ever wanted was for everyone to get along and care about each other. She then wishes there was more she could do for us, perhaps not realizing that simply seeing her alive and well is more than enough. She then thanks us for playing and tells us that despite reaching the end of the game, we can always come and visit as they'll always be there for us. And isn't that what any great game does? They're always there for us, our escape from reality when we need them to be. As Sayori bids us a final farewell, the game reaches its emotional, satisfying conclusion. So Sayori is really a pretty easy case, as she's either going to be fully rampant or fully metastable. Monika is a bit more of a puzzle though. Clearly she is defined by her psychotic, rampant state for much of the game, but what of her post-deletion? Is her remorse and resetting of the game without her a hint at metastability? I do think she is still around, but I don't necessarily think she is metastable. Perhaps she exists in a state of self-imposed exile, tormented by guilt for what she did. And maybe that's a fate she deserves. But again, we know she was a good person that cared for her friends deeply. And who's to say how anyone would act if one day they discovered they were actually a character in a video game? This of course doesn't excuse anything that she did, but I'm ever the optimist and I'd like to think that she can be saved. And let's face it, if anyone could save her, if ever there was anyone that wouldn't give up on her, it's Sayori. I don't imagine that would be an easy conversation for the two of them to have, but I'd like to think that the four of them end up together yet again, growing and learning just like the friends that they always were. Anyway, I really love this game, and that it reminded me of another game I really love, Marathon, is something I thought was really cool, so I'm glad I was able to put this video together. Thanks for watching. Bye.